Welcome to the Why Factor, a chance to work out why we do what we do. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
Thank you for downloading from the BBC. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.
BBC World Service. I'm Mike Williams with the Why Factor. Today, debt. A simple thing. I owe you. But when you look at it a little more deeply, it gets complex. Debt gets all tangled up with questions of morality, of obligation, tangled up with ideas of sin and society, notions of the world we want to live in and the world we used to live in.
In a medieval English village, for example, everybody owed each other money because there actually wasn't really any cash. Nobody had currency. So people just kept track in shillings and pence of what people owed each other, and then every 6 months to a year they'd have what they called a reckoning, and they'd sort of cancel it all out, and whatever was left over somebody gave somebody a pig or some cheese to square it all out. In that case, debt was seen as the very essence of social life. Of course everyone should be in debt to each other. My name is David Graeber. I'm a professor of anthropology at London School of Economics, and I'm author of a book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years.
Debt clearly is not a new thing. Has it changed its identity over the years, though?
Well, yes. It really has a lot to do with how debt is part of a larger structure, economic structure, so that in many cases debt is seen as the essence of sociality. In other periods, debt is seen as sort of a matter of crime. And it can go from one to the other very quickly. In fact, that's what happened here in the 1500s and 1600s. Suddenly this sort of relationship, which people thought was just absolutely normal sort of lifeblood of social life, was criminalized. So you could put people in prison for owing you money and not paying it back after a certain time, even sometimes have them killed. It's a really interesting thing if you look at the sort of great works of religious thought, whether it's the Brahmanas, the Hindu Brahmanas, whether it's the Bible. In a lot of those languages, Aramaic, Sanskrit, the word for debt, sin, and guilt is actually the same word. And in almost every case, they start by saying that debt is the basis of all morality. They say, your life is a debt you owe to the gods. Even the Lord's Prayer, it says, forgive us our debts just as we forgive others who owe us money. In the Bible, forgiving debts is sacred rather than paying them.
Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Many Christians will know the Lord's Prayer in English and will know what comes next. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. But in Latin, the words have a subtly different meaning.
Et dimite nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimitimus.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors.
Et dimite nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimitimus.
Joanne.
Yes.
Oh.
Take a seat.
In a house by the River Medway in the south of England, there's a fire burning to keep the cold at bay. The walls are filled with family photographs and prints of scenes from the Bible. This is where Anne and John live. And between this couple, there was a very special transaction. We have two stories for you. Listen to them both and decide yourself where morality lies. Later, the story of Jeanette and the loan sharks. But first, the tale of Anne's kidney.
Yeah, December 2011. I wasn't feeling too great.
John didn't know it at the time, but his kidneys were failing. Eventually, they learned that he needed a transplant. They hoped and they prayed for a donor. And remarkably, they found a match in Anne.
It's not a debt that, in my mind, I'm looking for any form of payment. Or maybe I'm being selfish. But the word thank you, to me, for someone to say thank you, it's an insult.
I'm interested in whether you feel, John, any obligation to repay that debt somehow. I can't imagine how you would.
Yes, I do, but she doesn't want anything in return, and over the years, I've learned that's the way she is. For me to even try to enforce my feelings for her, to show how much I really love her, it would be an insult to her.
OK, this is going to sound strange. And aren't you being a bit selfish? You've given John a kidney, but you won't let him... Yeah, you won't let him repay you in any way. You won't let him clear this debt, this obligation, even with a thank you.
I'm a firm believer that if you do something, you do it because you want to do it, not because you want to kind of have this person in your back pocket. I don't believe in that. And I've always said that to John. If I've upset him, just carry on as normal, scream, shout, whatever. And if he upsets me, I'll let him know, and if I upset him, he lets me know. And at no point do I think, hang on a minute, you can't talk to me like that, I gave you a kidney. That's, for me, that's immaterial. That doesn't come into it.
I wonder though, John, if you feel a debt to Anne.
I will always feel a debt to Anne. But like I say, it's not the kind of debt where I can say, look, I'll do this for you, I'll do that because you've done this for me. I wish you knew us before the transplant, and anyone you ask, you tell the same thing. There's hardly any changes in how I treat Anne.
I wonder if it's difficult. You feel a debt. I wonder if it's difficult to have a debt that simply cannot be repaid.
It is very difficult. It's very difficult. And like I've mentioned before, this is a very special thing that she's done for me. And I know Anne, I can't forever be saying to her, thank you, thank you. That's why it's difficult for me to repay this debt. Because as much as I'd love to say, express to her, and keep reminding her what you've done for me is fantastic, I know that's not what she wants. So I'll do what she wants me to do, which is not to mention it and just try to look after myself the best way I can.
John's debt, if it exists, is impossible to repay in kind. But many of us live with simpler obligations, easily quantified. They are monetary debts. Here's our second story, the tale of Jeanette and the loan sharks.
When the man came to the house here, he came and he said, yeah, just sign here. So my husband signed, and like a fool I signed. I didn't think, you see.
Jeanette lives in the town of Blackpool in the north of England. There's no kind way to say this, she says it herself. Her home is a wreck. 2 decades of overwhelming debt has left her with very little. One habitable room in a large, cold, empty, broken-down house.
And I signed this thing, and he said, right, he said, you're borrowing 2,000, but he said it's 2,450 you'll have to pay back for lending it. I thought, well, fair enough. It's a business, you've got to... Anyway, I paid it back. You know, my husband helped a bit, like, you know, with his pension and that. You know, it helped me, but, I mean, I managed to pay it back. I took in a bit of washing, I did a car boot sale, I sold everything that was in the house, paid it back. But then they came on to me, because we hadn't paid them fast enough, they wanted another 10,000. But we paid them the 10,000 back, but then I had to go to court. He said, we want £100,000 off her, and we want £1,400 a month interest. And I said, if he thinks they're going to get my house in Blackpool, 2 little London loan sharks, they're wrong. And I pointed at this man. I said, you and your boyfriend, I said, are not getting my house. I said, I'll burn it down first.
There'll be many people who say you shouldn't have taken that £2,000.
Well, I needed it to feed 5 children. I didn't need it for a new coat or a new diamond ring or a holiday and nothing, because a holiday is something I've never had in my life. I wouldn't know how to have a holiday. But, as I say, it was basically just for my children and to pay a bit of mortgage.
You took on this debt. You have an obligation to repay it, hadn't you?
Well, I paid it. The 2,000, I paid it. I paid 2,450. They added the 450 on.
That's the interest.
I paid everything. I sold everything. What jewellery I had went. I've nothing now. You know, all my nice clothes, I sold everything. I had beautiful suits, Italian suits, and I sold them all. I went to a car boot sale, I lined them up, woof, I sold them.
Jeanette had a clear legal responsibility to repay the money she borrowed. She signed the papers and spent the cash. But if we're talking about debt as a moral issue, it's also worth considering those who lent her the money. You said there were threats?
Threatens. Yeah, nasty. Yeah, you know.
What were they threatening you with?
Well, they weren't threatening me. They were threatening to what they were going to do to my husband and what they were going to do to my 2 youngest children.
Which was what?
They were going to kill him, you know. They was just going to kill him. You'll be sorry, we'll make you sorry. And, you know, and I thought this has got to end this. Then one day I had 18 phone calls in one day.
So you're getting these phone calls. What were they saying?
They weren't saying nothing, but they were doing it to unnerve me and upset me because they knew then we were scared, you see. They sent me another letter saying, well, we'll allow you to stay in your house as long as your husband's alive. But they knew he could have popped off at any minute, very poorly.
He was getting worse, was he?
Oh, he was getting worse and worse and worse. And then he had a stroke. And then I took him in the hospital, just with a stroke. And he dropped dead this May, what's just gone.
So how long did this last, from the first borrowing of £2,000?
Oh, over 20 years. Yes, it was horrible. It just kept going on and on and on. It was just like, you know, horrible.
It's hard not to feel sorry for Jeanette, but she made a deal. She signed a contract and she broke it.
Well, debt is a kind of a promise. I always say that our society is essentially a series of promises we make to one another, but a debt is a very peculiar kind of promise because it's a promise that can be made impersonal by what I call a kind of combination of mathematics and violence. It's a promise that can be exactly quantified. It's a promise that you can coercively enforce. You can call the bailiffs or the cops if someone doesn't do their side of the bargain. And as a result, it becomes transferable. You can give it to someone else, which you can't normally do with promises.
I'm calling on the Ajax Bank debt of $3,682. And Mike, now before we start talking about that...
Bill Bartman is a debt collector. He's made millions of dollars doing it, but he does it differently from most.
Because, Mike, I would imagine you have plenty of other debts. I would imagine you have all kinds of other obligations that you might also be having difficulty with. Is that correct, Mike?
I don't know how you know me so well, Bill.
And likely you would say, yes, it is. And I would then say, Mike, look, I'm a businessman and I want to collect my debt. And I know that if I can help you get on your feet, if I can help you recover, if I can help you get back to the place where you used to be, you will then have more wherewithal with which to pay me. So
Bill Bartman made a fortune in oil and gas, and then he lost it. He owed the bank $1 million, and in desperation, he asked for another loan. They gave him $13,000, and with that, he bought other people's debts.
And instead, I'm going to help you get out of your other debt. Is that okay with you?
Sounds great. Go.
Terrific. Well, Mike, then I need you to sign a couple of documents giving me a...
As David Graeber explained earlier, debt itself has become a commodity that can be traded. If you owe me $100 but aren't able or willing to pay, I may prefer to have something rather than nothing, so I sell your debt at a discount. Bill Bartman bought debts at about 10 or 15 cents on the dollar.
That I would then be able to call you back and say, Mike, I talked to your other credit card company and they're willing to settle for 15 cents on the dollar. Can you come up with 15 cents on the dollar to make them go away? I don't get paid by them. I don't get paid by you. I want to get you out of debt. I want to get you back on your feet.
What do you think is the value in treating someone the way that you do? What's different?
What's really different is we help the customer increase their self-esteem. And I know that sounds foo-foo, and some people go, some people just don't care about that. But in reality, at the end of the day, Mike, our opinion of ourselves controls almost every other action. If we think we are not a good person, if we think we're not a good father, not a good husband, not a good breadwinner, not a good provider, not somebody who can take care of our obligations, then quite frankly, we start thinking less about ourselves. Well, if we can get a person to a place where they can start to pay their bills again, where they can get a better job, it's amazing what else happens. And here's what we have seen. And this is not some sociological theory. This is now 27 years, 4.5 million examples. We have watched the divorce rate come down. We have watched the alcoholism rate come down. We've watched drug abuse incidences come down. We've watched spousal abuse and child abuse incidents come down. And it's not a panacea. It's not a total solution. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to cure every illness and solve every problem. But when you look at the prime cause of most of the social ills, whether we're talking divorce or financial or otherwise, they come back to financial friction in the family. They come back to a place where the family no longer can do that which the family used to be able to do.
In a strange way, John and Jeanette have something in common. They both had unpayable debts. Anne simply won't let John pay his debt. She insists there is none, despite the obligation that he feels. And a judge eventually released Jeanette from the crippling demands of her creditors. Are you free of debt now?
Well, there's only one, what you call real debt. It's to pay for my husband's funeral. You see, he wasn't insured. And although I got help, to pay for it, there was still quite a lot outstanding. But they let me pay every week. So when I get my old age pension, I put it in an envelope and I send it to the funeral parlour. And then they send me a letter back saying so much off, so... But you can't really call that debt. I mean, he didn't ask to die. He didn't ask to get ill and he didn't ask to die.
If I take on a debt, it's my debt, it's my obligation. It's not your obligation to help me. Isn't it something that I should do myself?
Of course. And you should educate yourself, and you should clothe yourself, and you should do all things for yourself. But most of us can't. Most of us can't heal ourselves when we become ill. Most of us can't take care of things that are beyond our expertise or our level of education. And that doesn't give anybody a hall pass to say me or the government or somebody else is going to babysit and nursemaid and pluck everybody out of the mire when they fall into it. But at the same token, we have to overtly recognize that not all people have the same level of skill, the same level of education, the same level of training, the same level of gumption and get up and go. And when some of them suffer, we can either walk by them as if we don't see them, or we can stop and help them. And in my world, I prefer to stop and help them.
There are dozens of different podcasts now available from the BBC, including news, documentaries, science, business, arts and sport. For details of them all, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.